Good evening, everybody. It's Shelley Hoffman, and I am happy to say that I have Kevin Rode and Bob Wicks. Robert Wicks is on his screen, but you'll hear me call him Bob a lot. But they're here tonight because I know I had some questions about the upcoming election, and both gentlemen were nice enough to say they would come on, and I had thrown out to the community to see if anyone else had questions. So I appreciate everybody who gave me questions, gave me feedback. I really appreciate it. So because the most important part is getting the questions and the answers from you gentlemen. I'm going to start with you, Bob. If you could just introduce yourself briefly, tell us what you've accomplished in the time as supervisor and why we should reelect you as our town supervisor.
Okay. Robert Wicks, I've been your supervisor for the last 4 years, and I'm sure you received my postcard in the mail. But if you haven't, some of the things I've done, I'll just list a few of the things, but some of the more important things were lowered the tax rate by about 20% now. We are moving into our budget, and this year's budget is going to be 2% lower than last year. So there's going to be a 2% reduction there. We stopped the annual property assessments. So that was one of the big things that people were complaining about, that each year they got reassessed, and we took care of that for them. We utilized grant funding to complete over $2 million worth of infrastructure improvements. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's probably closer to $3 million right now. And then what that means is when we are able to use grant funding to complete roads and ditches and any type of infrastructure, it means the taxpayers don't have to pay for it out of local tax dollars. Completed over $400,000 worth of park improvements utilizing grant funding. That was one of the things that people told me when I was campaigning the first time around, especially people that lived in the outer areas, like in Plainville or over near Jack's Reeves, that they didn't want to pay for the park. Well, you have to have a park. I mean, some of these amenities, any quality community has these amenities, but I took that to heart, and the improvements that we made were made with grant funding, so their local tax dollars didn't pay for that. We passed a senior citizens exemption, which allows more seniors to qualify for the exemptions. And I see people coming in every day, and I see how they're struggling to pay their bills. So that was important to me, and I always try to take care of our seniors. And we initiated exemptions for volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. Our firefighters and ambulance workers are having a tough time recruiting and maintaining personnel in their departments, and this was a big step towards that. I'm also preparing us for the future with additional grant and development opportunities, working with public safety officials and in order to keep our community safe. With all the things that are going on in the news, and everybody sees that, the public safety is at the forefront of things. But if anybody knows what I've done throughout my career, I've always been involved with public safety, and so I'm always concerned with our public. I initiated a school resource program over in Marcellus that's actually being copied throughout Onondaga County, including the Balmesville school system, which uses the retired police officers with special skills and abilities. So these are some of the things that I'm working on, as well as working on an emergency management plan with our local public safety officials.
Thank you very much, Bob. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kevin. And this time I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself as well, but then address the areas of concern for our town that made you run for town supervisor and the qualifications you have for that position.
Thank you, Shelley, for hosting this event. My name is Kevin Rode, for those who don't know me. I've lived in Lysander my entire life, lived everywhere from Coppernoe Road to Church Road to Radisson. I have not lived in the village, but I know a lot of people in the village. And, one of the reasons I ran for town council is, it still hasn't really changed a lot. I don't see a lot of outreach and communication from our town board to our constituents, and we get a lot of people that are coming in asking questions and have concerns. I've managed, what gives me the qualifications to run for town supervisor, I've managed anywhere from 5 people to 100 people. I've been in warehouse distribution. I've been in clothing distribution. I'm currently in food service distribution. And I also distributed chemicals. We had guys on the road driving trucks, people in warehouses. I've managed a lot of different areas and facets, and I also help with the finances at our company. So I feel that gives me the background to run for a supervisor and do the job well.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you both for being here. So I'm going to move on to the question part of it. Just so everyone is aware, the questions were given, not all the questions were given except for the very last one I'm going to ask in advance, but I did mix them up and I'm not asking every question that I sent them. So I will start the question with the number. So that way, in case they did write notes or something, or they have statistics they want to look at, they know which question I'm referring to. So Kevin, I'm going to start with you for this first question. And beyond the impact of COVID, because obviously that was a horrible thing that everybody went through, what in your opinion has been the most challenging aspect our town has confronted over the past 4 years?
One of the first things we had to do, and I wasn't on the board at the time, was, see what the path forward after COVID was. We seem to have got through very well. We've got federal funding. We got the ARPA funds that we're still deciding what we're spending and how we're using it. One of the other things I see really moving forward is since COVID, we've had pretty much a huge boom in residential and even interest in commercial properties. So balancing that influx and growth is one of the biggest things I see us having to do. And with that comes our comprehensive land use plan, deciding what we can do and where we can do it and how we can do it, and keep everybody in the area of Lysander happy with the progress we're making. It's traffic is always a concern in Lysander, and we're doing our best to make it a reasonable growth. It's not like when I grew up here in the 70s. There's a lot more people here now, and a lot of people want to come here. It's a great place to live. So the residential and our commercial and industrial growth are the two biggest things I see.
Thank you. And I will be popping in and off the screen just so you guys can focus more on Bob and Kevin instead of seeing me. So, but Bob, again, this was the first question that I had sent you guys. How would you like to address the biggest challenge our town has had in the last 4 years?
The hardest thing was over the last 4 years, especially with COVID, was being able to do all the things required by a municipality, the roads, the infrastructure, the parks, and providing services that are required by law, codes, planning, town clerk's office, while keeping the taxes down. I've been able to do it through good planning, deciding that what's essential and non-essential programs. Working with department heads, we were able to eliminate non-essential spending, which helps keep taxes down. Consolidating duties, parks and the deputy clerk as an example of one. We eliminated one position and didn't eliminate 2 positions, but eliminated one and consolidated into one. So instead of having a full-time position and a part-time position, now we only have one full-time position. Actually working with legislators to obtain grant funding. We've been able to obtain grant funding through county parks or for our county, from the county for our parks and roads. We were also able to get state funding for our roads and infrastructure and federal funding. The county actually gave us $1,000 for our park and $150,000 for our roads and infrastructure. The state, we received over $1 million in additional road projects and drainage, and $200,000 for park improvements, along with $50,000 in parking in the parks. And the federal government actually provided money so that we could take care of water, sewer, and drainage issues that we had throughout the town. Cutting spending is one of the things that economists will tell you should be doing in hard economic times, and this is what we have. So that was the biggest issue for us, especially with all the increase in costs for everything that we purchase, our office supplies, our road equipment, our anything that we have to purchase to do any type of infrastructure work has all gone up anywhere from 150 to 160, 170%. So keeping the taxes down during that time was the biggest formidable challenge, and I've been able to do it each year I've been in office.
Thank you. Kevin, just since you went first, is there anything you'd like to say about Bob's answer? Since
No, I commend what the board has done with the budgets and the obstacles we had. I just feel that we have to put responsible budgets together. In the 8 or 9 years before Supervisor Wicks took office, there was a lot of progress made on making sure equipment was, being brought up to date, and, responsible spending practices were done. There's, high weight equipment plan. We varied off that, which I understand sometimes happens with, something like COVID, but we also have to not sell ourselves short in the long run. And I think that if we show the public a plan and show them the process and show them the long-term benefits of, moving toward that and reaping the benefits of hopefully decreasing the cost and replacement of items, overall, that would be a better path forward. But, that's one of the things we tend to disagree on quite a bit at board meetings, but that's fine. It's good.
That plan wasn't developed 8 years ago. I developed that plan with the highway and the engineer when I came in. And like with any plan, things change. We didn't have the hyperinflation 4 years ago when that plan was developed. So once we had that and all the costs went up, you have to modify a plan, just like with anything, like anybody does in their household budgets.
Well, I can definitely agree with the household budget part of it for sure. So moving on to the next question, this one's going to go first to you, Bob, and it was question number 4 that I sent you. So as we navigate the complexities of our local tax structure, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the current assessment freeze and its implications for school taxes. Additionally, how do you perceive the role of the equalization rate in ensuring a fair and balanced approach to the school taxes?
Okay. We have to work with the system that we have in place. Until Albany changes the rules, and that's what we have to work with. School taxes, by stopping assessments, residents will be able to see exactly how much their school taxes are increasing. So by stopping the assessments, now they can't blame it on the assessments. They'll actually see that their taxes are increasing because the budget's going up. There are no implications on the school taxes because if the school doesn't increase their budget, then there's not going to be any changes. The freezing the assessments has nothing to do with anything with the school budget. The school budget is the school budget. Everything has to do with their spending. So if they don't increase spending, then the budget won't go up, and they're able to tax. So the assessments don't have anything to do with it. Now, the equalization rate is not fair. There's no doubt about it, but it's more fair than to Lysander residents than staying with the 100% assessment. If we would have stayed at that 100% assessment this year, people would have been paying more in school taxes than they already are. It would have went up. I think the assessor told me 14% if we would have stayed at 100% assessment. Van Buren is paying $1.10 more per thousand, and that would be for a $200,000 house. They're paying $220,000 less than we would in Lysander. But again, my opponent here said, brought that up, but that's because the equalization rate takes into account all the property over there, not just residential homes. They'll include a commercial property and vacant land. So their commercial property, vacant land, and residential housing is valued less than it is in the town of Lysander. If you use clay, and I brought this up last year when we talked about the assessments, we compared a $200,000 house in Clay, and they haven't been at 100% assessment for 30 years. I think they're at 3.6% assessment now, and we have been. And what that meant, a $200,000 in Clay on one side of the river is paying $1,000 less than a $200,000 house in the town of Lysander. That's because that equalization rate is not a fair balance when you have someone that's at 100, or a town that's at 100% and another town that isn't. The only way to make it more fair is to have everybody have the state come in and do the equalization rate across the board. And in Onondaga County, currently there are only, I believe there are only two towns, Manlius and DeWitt, that stuck with the 100% assessments, and their people are coming with pitchforks and tar and feather to have them change to what we're just doing now is with the equalization rate.
Thank you. Kevin, I'm going to toss that same question over to you.
Sure. Yeah, as Supervisor Wicks said, I brought up at the last meeting that, people in Van Buren are paying $1 less than Lysander residents. And, just in the first year, that's already gone up $1. Last year, we were paying a penny different than that. And for the 4 years before that, it was less than a penny. And it varied. Some years Van Buren paid maybe 0.002 cents more, and some years we did. But freezing assessments, I just equate that to not doing our job. And I think comparing Clay, we all know Clay froze, hasn't reassessed in years. And we do need to lobby the state as the towns to say, hey, this isn't fair. But we should have lobbied the town of Van Buren as we share the assessor. And, Van Buren forced the hand of the board, or at least how they felt. And yes, if we would have stayed the course with 100% assessment, that, we probably would have paid more. But at the same time, I don't know why we couldn't work with the town of Van Buren more and say, listen, we can't control Clay, but we share an assessor. And we should keep doing our job, because I didn't see where we've cut the assessor or made any huge funding modifications in the assessor's department. So I don't know if it's saved us any money, but it, between Van Buren and Lysander, it's cost us, on an average home, like you said, $20 more. What I want to see is have the state rectify the issue. Town of Salina a couple years ago, when they decided, they lobbied the state and they wrote when they made a resolution, we should all jump on that. We should all work together as towns. But equalization rates only affect your county and your school taxes. But assessments overall, whatever the school district or the municipality needs to raise, tax rates and assessments are just the assessment is how it gets divvied up as to who pays what. And if the fire department or the fire district needs to raise X amount of money, it all comes down to expenses and revenues. And the difference in between is usually made up by the tax rate, unless there's some kind of grant funds or unappropriated fund balances we can put in. And that's where we need to make this fair. And we need to work with Van Buren and say, they stayed above 95%. In the first year, talking to Teresa, we've already changed 10% in assessed value. And we get hit with the equalization rate. And, from her forecast, because we always have more, more people are moving to Lysander, the property values go up. That's going to widen every year. And it's going to be, to me, an unfair burden on the town of Lysander taxpayers. And we should really look back at our agreement with Van Buren and sharing the assessor, because ultimately, if our value goes up and Van Buren stays the same, Lysander will end up paying a lot more for the assessor, the part of the assessor that we pay for.
Thank you. Bob, would you like to address anything back on
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, I would. My opponent said that Lysander stayed at 95%. Lysander didn't stay at 95%.
No, I said Van Buren stayed around 95%.
I'm sorry, Van Buren. Van Buren did not stay at 95%. It's not up to Van Buren what their equalization rate is. It's the state. And we didn't stay at 90%. The state comes in and tells us what the equalization rate is. That's where my opponent doesn't understand the assessments. So what happens is the state will come in and they take a look at the value of the property now. So they took a look at the value of the property in the town of Van Buren, and they said they only went down 5%. And like I said, because the value of their property isn't the same as it is in Lysander, the value of our property went up much more. So they said ours went up 10%. Theirs only went up 5%. So working with them has nothing to do with anything with the equalization rate. The state is going to come in and tell you what the value of the property is, and then they're going to put a value on that. So that's where not understanding exactly what the assessments are and how they work and what the equalization rate is causing this discussion. And that's why my opponent really is taking a position he is, because he just doesn't understand the equalization rate.
No, if we stayed at 100% assessment, which we were, and don't fall below 95%, the equalization rate wouldn't come into play.
If we stayed at 100%, everybody would be paying an additional 2% in the property tax this year. So by stopping the assessments, they actually save 2%. So what you're suggesting is we stay at 100% so that everybody can pay 2% more in the property taxes. I don't think we should do that, and neither does the rest of the board.
I do know, and I'm just going to interject if you don't mind, that often Teresa's asked to come in and explain it. So thanks for taking the time to answer that question, because there is a lot to do with the equalization rate, and it's not always understood by everybody. The next question I have would have been question 3. And Kevin, I'm going to send this one to you first. Okay. Considering the imminent arrival of Micron, how confident are you that the current comprehensive land use plan, and I know it hasn't been voted on yet, it's been tabled again, but effectively safeguards Lysander from the potential overdevelopment? Conversely, do you believe it strikes an appropriate balance that allows for sustainable growth in the wake of the significant economic development? And I just want to add, if you're a resident of the town of Lysander, we obviously love the town of Lysander. So this question stems from how can we grow but not get overdeveloped, right?
It's a tough question. Seems like everybody wants to move to Lysander. Onondaga County really doesn't gain population, but it seems like Lysander does. So the club, we at a town board level try to use it as a roadmap and a guide. At a planning board level, they will refer to the comprehensive land use plan to see if a project or a development fits into the scope of the club. I don't know if our current club, with the couple issues the public has raised, is where the citizens of Lysander want to move forward on some of those things. A majority of it has been resolved. I think we've had public hearings and meetings and discussions for 4 months. Everybody seems to be fine with everything except one caveat, which, that's been brewing for the last 2.5 years about the increasing industrial usage on the one parcel that could do it outside of Radisson. It seemed like at the last meeting, we had 4 board members that are fine with that, and nobody else spoke of any other issues, but we didn't have a vote on it. The county, when I went to the Plan On meeting, and the town supervisor was also there, it was held at town of Lysander Town Hall. The county's going to look at the clubs, and that will give them the idea of what towns are looking for, what kind of development moving forward. And the county's, given monies to towns to work on their comprehensive land use plans so people can decide what they think their town wants or what kind of development they're going to want to do. So I think we should really look at our comprehensive land use plan and decide if that's what we want to portray to the county, because the county's going to go out. They're the ones that are going out and trying to get development. We don't really have that mechanism at the town level. And I think we need to look through the comprehensive plan and determine with our areas of development and what infill we can have, is that the best process? The one big development we've had that we talked about starting in May, The Melvin Farm project, we're waiting on the developer to come back to answer the questions that the planning board put to them. And even at a board level, we have to decide, is that going to be when the developer comes to us with the final say? He's given us a map that really didn't change much in my eyes. The public around the area doesn't think that's a great project for there, but there's also a lot of areas around there that need, sewer and better drainage. And sometimes the project outweighs that cost of the traffic or, a little more, a couple more neighbors. But right now, it's an incentive zoning area. And that's where I've asked the board since we started incentive zoning, should we look at the overlay? The overlay was pretty much taken off TDR, which ended up dead back in 2012. And we might want to look at different areas with Micron coming where we should put the incentive overlay over more areas to have a little more control of what people might want to propose there and what the town board could ask of to change the zoning.
Thank you. Bob, I'm going to throw that same question to you.
Okay. Well, I'll address some of the things that my opponent said here. He's talking about additional incentive zoning. I think the public has said that they don't want additional development. They don't want any more incentive zoning. Well, we have two areas that are already assigned for industrial use, and that's in the Radisson development area, and that's where I think they should stay. I'm not in favor of any additional industrial use areas throughout the town. What I'd like to see is to just take what we have already, because that's been on the books for over 60 years, and see what type of development we can have in there. Now, there's a lot of propaganda around about warehouses that are going in, and there is no warehouse going in. Now, that area is prime for other opportunities. The developer could come in and he could put up a place like Brittenfield, where you have municipal office or you have medical offices in there. So that whole place could be a medical park. We could have an industrial area that has like a one-day surgery center like they have out in Fayetteville. Those would be great opportunities for the town of Lysander. If something like that moved in, sure, I would be a fan of that, because it would offer an increased tax base, and it would offer jobs for people to participate in, and it would make it more convenient for people that are doing their one-day surgery. But as far as any additional areas, I think we should look to develop the areas that we already have, not increase any additional areas, but look for good opportunities to put in those specific areas. Now, again, I don't know how many times I can state this, but there is no United Auto Warehouse going in, and yet some people are still perpetuating that myth that is going in, and it's not.
Thank you. Kevin, is there anything you would like to address back to Mr. Wicks?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say is I just checked with our planning board clerk last week, and while the developer withdrew his OSIDA tax break application, he has not formally withdrawn the approval of the site plans approved for a warehouse. Whether he chooses to build one is up to him, but there's been no formal withdrawal at the town level from what I gathered from our planning board, and that was last Friday. So that it's industrial, they could do as much as an industrial area could allow with our current zoning. A medical, a medical park or something like that at the end of 690, that would be interesting. It would have to come back through site plan approval. And, the county ledge voted in December to allow a curb cut on Hinkle Boulevard. That's probably the first time in 40 years that's happened. So obviously some of the roadblocks that were presented back in 2021 with having to have a traffic light on 690, where it turns into Route 48 to allow use of that property. Obviously the county has changed their idea on what could access Hinkle Boulevard. But if that's the only access to that property, in talking with some of our planning board members, there's significant concerns. That intersection was made horribly by the state 50 years ago when they built 690. And it hasn't gotten any better with the, residential growth in Lysander. A lot more people, when I was a kid, that traffic light was a flashing light, and you'd stop in the middle, getting across 690 to get from Hinkle Boulevard to Church Road. And, finally they had a traffic light in. Then they finally put the turn lanes in. And I've seen hellacious accidents there. My grandmother was in one because she turned left and she didn't have a left directional trying to turn onto Hinkle Boulevard. It's a concern that if the county's going to allow growth like that, the county and the state should fix that intersection. So that's all I can say about that.
Thank you.
They before they do anything, the developer is going to have to go back in because of that curb cut. He's going to have to go back in and amend any type of plan he has. And that's not how it works. They don't withdraw anything because when they go before the planning board, they have to bring in documentation and they have to employ their lawyers and everybody else, their engineers. So they're not going to go through that process, that expense when they're not going to build that warehouse. What they will do when they do amend that site plan, that's when they'll do it. They'll say, no, we're not going to build that. This is what we want to build, and come in with an amended site plan. And any of the traffic issues are going to be addressed by not only Onondaga County, but the state. The state will have to approve any type of business or industry that goes in that area and ensure that traffic patterns are safe for everybody involved.
Thank you. All right, thanks, gentlemen, for those answers. The next one, I'm kind of switching gears a little bit, but Kevin, you've mentioned a couple times how Lysander is growing and people want to move to Lysander. And that has to do with my next question, which was question number 5 when I sent them to you. As our community continues to grow, new residential developments are on the horizon. How do you envision these developments contributing to the overall well-being of our community? And what considerations would you take into account regarding the density of these developments to ensure a balance between growth and maintaining our community's character? And I'd like to add, just because a couple members of our community, they were hoping that you had some long-term plans to reduce car dependency and improve walkability in our community. And then how to acquire and preserve more open space for public enjoyment while all this development is happening. And Bob, I'm putting this question to you first.
Great. Any new developments that come into our town, I'm encouraging them, and I have spoke with some developers, to take a look at town centers. That's one of the things that the county executive has encouraged, to have small town centers. Like, you go down to Florida and you go down to the southern states, they're all over the place. I lived in a place called Fishhawk Ranch, and they had an area where there was an amphitheater in it. They had some small shops. People could gather there, and it was all walkable. They had trails all over the place. And in each one that comes in, I try to encourage them to incorporate senior housing. That's going to help with any traffic that any increase in traffic when you're talking increase in housing, because seniors travel at a different time and they don't travel as much as everybody else. And then what you could also do is with these different types of town centers, and I think good places would be on the edge of the village where you could have connectivity to the village. So along Route 31, there's ample areas where some of those areas could be developed. Then we could put sidewalks in, we could put trails in, biking and walking trails. It would be connected to the village. So that would help with the walkability along there from the village into the town centers or town centers back. And it would also be connected to Radisson. The more dense areas, the more dense we can keep these, the new growth, it opens up more green space. So if we can keep things, instead of having these big sprawling developments with 1, 2, 3 acre lots, we cut the lots down, they can be more dense. And then you're able to put more sidewalks in, more green spaces. The a good example of that, if you look at Timber Banks, Timber Banks has a nice mixture of townhomes. They have apartments, they have senior housing, and they have single family residences. That area is a beautiful area. I think Joe Alberici has done a great job with that area, and that's the type of thing that we can look at, places like that. Connectivity, I even talked to him about extending. They have a trail extending that over to Radisson, and later on getting some grant money and extending the trail from Timber Banks into the village, and then from Timber Banks into Onondaga Lake Park, where people would be able to get either walk or run or ride their bikes all the way down into the park, and they'd be able to get all the way to the city. As far as traffic, people are worried about traffic. I've been working with legislators since I've been in office. I've had meetings with every one of our legislators, from federal all the way down the county. You know, our Senate, our state senators, our assembly people, our congressmen, and I've talked to them about traffic. I've also talked to state DOT and county planning to come up with a plan on what we can do to address that issue of traffic in the village. And it's a complex issue. There's going to have to be some long range planning, and DOT is going to have to be involved, and we're already working on it right now.
Thank you. Kevin, tossing that same question to you, please.
Yeah. One of the things, that we have in the town of Lysander is Timber Banks and Radisson, PUDs. They pretty much, the town approves a plan. They got their property. They pretty much dictate what's in there after that part. And, Radisson with the industrial area, Timber Banks is going to be a lot more residential. And they can change that plan over time. The one thing we can do as a town, we can use the incentive zoning. We can, look at other areas of how we can move forward, and what micron in whatever fashion it's built. It's obviously going to change the way 31 is through town. You might have more people driving 31 now to get to Clay because they're working over there, whereas primarily it's a lot of people driving through town to get to the city. The village, we got a river that runs that, segregates our town from the south. So there's only a couple ways over it. We have to work, as Supervisor Wicks said, you have to work with your, federal and state and county elected officials to get that funding to widen the roads, to make the roads work better, traffic lights that are synced up so people aren't sitting for long amounts of time. One thing we have here, as much as we complain about traffic, we don't have traffic compared to like the Orlando area or a major metropolitan area, which thank God we don't. But, as we have more houses, and, that's what our town had decided years ago. We didn't want to look like Clay. So people need a place to live, and everybody loves to live out here. And, we are geographically segregated by Three Rivers Wildlife Management Area. A majority of the northwest corner of the town, outside of the 370 corridor, it will be hard to build, small tract development out there. There's no cheap way to get water and sewer to that side of town. We may be able to connect to the Oswego County water lines that run to the edge of Oswego County, but that's not going to be cheap. Oswego County was able to pull that off by, getting grants from the state because of their levels of income and federal government to run water down the main roads. What I'd like to see us do is, work on our town roads, sidewalks, Route 31. We talk about getting into the village. Right now, there really isn't many easy ways into the village once you're outside of, once you're into the town part of the village. We've got to increase our sidewalks. It'd be great to have a sidewalk going down to the park, but which side of the road do you put it on? People have lived there for years. they're not real fans of having a sidewalk on their, on their front lawn, because with the sidewalk, you get the people who litter, or you get the people who don't pick up after their dogs. So there's a lot of growing pains with that. Radisson would be a great place to have one of those town centers that is dictated in Micron. There's still a lot of areas in Radisson. I live across from one where there's still room for a town center where we could have a small shopping, a grocery store, even across the street over behind Sunshine Mini Mart and the ice cream shop. There's acreage there to have something for people to go to, but there's no walkability on Route 31. We need sidewalks. We need trails. It would be great to try to develop the riverfront trail that has been discussed for years and years. And every year we get further away from it, it gets harder to build it because of people buying property, and, maybe it doesn't fit that scheme anymore, or how do you get from here to here? And there will have to be parts where we could pull the trail off, but we're going to have to come up to Route 370 or use some of our town roads to get around some of the places we can't get to. The infill, we've got all these out on the peninsula, as everybody says, the 370 River Road area. We have a lot of places that we've had, 10 or 20 homes go up that have dry sewers. We have to work on a plan on connecting them. These people have built 30, 40 years ago, and you thought the infill would come, and it never came because of, the cost of putting the infrastructure in. So, and that's where, incentive zoning could help us, because that's why a lot of incentive zoning area is on the peninsula. And, people on the peninsula might want another park to work, to attend instead of the one over on the north, the north side of town. So there's a lot of things that we can do that will help our community, but there's a lot of things that they cost a lot of money, and we've got to come up with the best financial way to do it.
Thank you. Bob, do you have anything you'd like to say back to Kevin?
Well, yeah, I'm glad that he thinks my plan is a good plan, because everything he talked about, that's what I'm working on already. I talked about having connectivity along Route 31 with the village, and I've already talked to developers. I'm working on a plan as we speak. The areas behind the Sunshine Market that he's talking about, I've already put together a committee to look at economic development for the town of Lysander. I want to make sure that the town of Lysander's concerns are addressed. And that's why I put this committee together. We're talking about developing that area along Route 31. We're talking about putting in maybe a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods, something like that. There are a lot of areas in there, and that's where that we could put some commercial development and develop Route 31, and then connect to the village. It'll just be an extension of the village. And as far as the development, that's where it should go. That's where I see the development, as well as if you start developing those areas, it's going to help our local businesses. Some of the storefronts that are vacant in the village, I think, will fill up once we get a more vibrant area and more money comes into the town of Lysander. But my committee's looking at all of those concerns already. And that's why I put it together to have those plans. And I am working with developers already. I talked to them as early as last year when I heard Micron was coming, to start looking at town centers and where we could put those town centers. And we're already working. I'm already working on it as we speak.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to say, that's great news. It's the first time in 2 years I've been on the board almost that I've heard it. So that's excellent news.
Well, you've never come into my office to ask me what's going on, so it's pretty.
But that's where in a town board meeting you could explain that to the public. They shouldn't have to walk in. You could
also come into the office and talk about it.
Okay, so we're going to move to the next question, and this one is I'm going to go to you, Kevin. Okay, to start. Okay. As the cost of running our town continues to rise, there's a growing need for financial resources. How do you plan to address the increased cost, and where do you propose obtaining the necessary funds to ensure the continued effective functioning of our town?
to,
And this was, just so you know, this was question number 9.
Yep. Yeah, okay. Oh, I had 9 as the arts and culture.
Oh, sorry.
And this is 10, but that's okay.
Question number 6. That's question 6.
You know what? So you two, just for so
Yeah.
everybody's clear. So, when I sent you the questions, Kevin, I took a minute and I took a particular question off the list. So I'm not going to
Okay.
ask you that one. So that's probably where the confusion is. Bob, you would have it as question number 9.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, that's arts and culture.
Oh, then I apologize. I didn't know.
Okay. No, it's fine. You know, as the supervisor said before, you know, that one of the things the town, one of the things we could do is, you know, county, state, federal grants, looking for, and there's a lot of them. This summer we talked to our engineer, and there is a plethora of grants out there, but you got to apply, you got to be able to get them, and you have to have a good plan, and we can work toward that. We have, you know, we have ARPA funding that was totally made to, you know, when it was originally started, it was a finite set of rules that you could follow. Now ARPA funding can help anything. We've helped various things with ARPA funding over, you know, the last couple of years. We've put a lot of money into the park. We've put money aside to work on drainage issues, or, you know, and we've also looked at, you know, we helped with the ambulance corps. There's a lot of avenues we can go to without going to the taxpayers first. The other thing we can do is, you know, be responsible with our budgets, forecast what our future costs are going to be. If we have issues, you know, infrastructure issues or building issues, let's make the plan out and let's start putting money in the reserves or applying for grants, checking into equipment. You know, any kind of, you know, the state usually likes to give some money out for repairing buildings, or, you know, we've got some bathroom modifications at town hall we need to do. And as ADA and other things, accessibility, our highway barn, we need to update possibly the bathrooms there to allow, you know, male and females to be able to work there as we move along. But we gotta work on the state and federal part and have that relationship with our congressmen, with our state senators, and with our state assembly, and even with our county officials. Brian May has done a great job of, you know, asking what our needs are and helping out with any issues that arise. A couple years back, the water chestnuts, the county put money into it to take care of water chestnuts, and I called Senator Mannion, and a couple of weeks later, you know, we got a grant from the state. It's great to see people when we give them our needs, that they, you know, they try to reach out and find revenue sources for us. So, you know, to try to not put it on the taxpayer and make Lysander better is what I try to do.
Thank you. Bob, same question to you.
Okay. As far as the grant, that came from the county for the water chestnuts. The county ponied up $800,000 for that. And again, I'm glad that my opponent thinks that we should be conversing with our state and local officials, because that's exactly what I've been doing the whole time. Now, as far as sustainability, you shouldn't be using one-time grants for sustainability. I mean, because it won't sustain it. You got a one-time grant. They should be used for things like if you have a specific road that has to be repaired, okay, that's a good use for it. But when you're looking at to secure funds for sustained functionality, you're looking at long-term growth. How are we going to do that? Well, if we put some senior housing in, if we put town centers in, and we can get business growth in the community, that'll all help with the tax base. And with an increased tax base, that's going to help with our funding, and that's going to spread out the cost of everybody. If you have 500 people paying taxes, it's better than having 100 people paying it. So we have to find ways to increase our tax base and to have more funding from like housing developments. Like I said, senior housing, if we get the town centers in, that'll have increased businesses, and also growth within our village, we'll be able to, if we fill up some of those storefronts, those will help with the tax base as well. If we get those industrial areas functioning with opportunities that are consistent with our way of life in Lysander. And like I said earlier, you get if you could get a one-day surgery center or something like that, or an office park in there, those would be great ways to help with our tax base and keep the taxes down for the rest of us, because there's going to be continued pressure for taxes because of the cost of everything going on. And when you can have more people moving in, you can, if you open up senior housing, you can have more people moving into the area. That'll open up other residences, and we can have spread out or have additional tax base without having too much growth.
Thank you. Anything to add back to that, Kevin?
Yeah, I just like to say that I don't know if residential growth will lower our the taxes we pay. Maybe at a town level, and if we were going to become a senior community, maybe it would take the pressure off our schools. But as our schools grow, and union budgets, and 80%, what's the number? It's roughly 80% of the school budget when you vote on budget day. You're not voting on. That's all predetermined cost by the school board and state mandates and whatever the union contract requires. I don't see our school taxes going down with everything we're trying to do at the schools. So, at the town level, we try to do the best we can, and we fight over nickels. I mean, we fight over nickels. That never ends at the town level. But easily in one school budget, it can more than wipe out what we've done in 2 or 3 town budgets with the difference in taxes. So, if we have senior affordable apartments or condos that don't, eventually we've got to figure out the assessment issue. If we freeze them for however many years, I mean, we could be like Clay and just let it go forever. I guess that's an option. But eventually the state will step in and determine something has to change. And, and that falls out. So, it's got to be a balance. And we've decided at our planning level for years and years, we don't want to be Clay. So the residential has won out in Lysander. And I've never seen that help lower school taxes yet.
Well, if we add senior housing, there's going to be additional tax base there. That's just the bottom line. If you have more housing, the housing development is going to have to, whoever the developer is going to have to pay with the taxes. And you are right. We do argue over nickels. The only difference is I'm arguing not to spend the nickels. You argue to spend them. And I can give you a quote here. And when I said that my philosophy is not to raise taxes, your comment back to me, and I'm quoting, sometimes you just have to raise taxes. And that, although that is true in a lot of instances that we have these discussions, it's more about wants than needs. I am concerned about what we need, and you seem to be more concerned about what the highway department wants.
Well, in that regard, we did have a pretty responsible highway budget that was, made 5 years ago. And, the 2 of the people on the board were all gung-ho into it at that point in time. And that thought process changed.
It wasn't a budget. It was a 5-year plan. And I told you.
The 5-year plan that you said you created,
the 5-year plan.
Following in year 2.
The budget, if I'm correct, the budget work meetings are on PAC-B, are they not?
Yes.
I did end up watching one. I think I told both of you and tell the community as well that I watched a lot more meetings and I caught up on stuff. So I would assume a lot of that conversation that you guys are talking about right now, you could probably see where the cuts and stuff were made in that work meeting. Would that be a correct assumption?
This year, definitely. Yeah.
There really was only one cut. This year, the budget got in their budget. The highway budget was increased by $97,000, like they had increase every year since I've been in there. But there was one cut. It really wasn't a cut. It was a transfer of funds to a contingency fund, because the highway superintendent and Mr. Road were asking for $299,000 for salt, and the highway hasn't spent over $160,000 in the past 5 years, and they still have 150 tons of salt in the salt barn, and about $80,000 till the end of the year that they could spend for salt. So I didn't think that was an appropriate amount to ask for.
Well, and
Well,
like
in regards to the salt, I will say this: Ken received an original county contract quote that was 30 cents higher than this year, and that's where he originally came up with the difference in cost. Then he received another quote that brought it down to more of a realistic number, and we decided, and that's what budget work sessions are for. I'm all for a department head bringing to me their wants and needs, and the town board decides, because the town board's the financial arm. We're the ones answering the public. Why does it take 4 hours to plow the roads? Because we only have 9 or 10 full-time MEOs, and you can only do 8 or 9 plow routes with those people. So that's the answers. When the highway supervisor gets those questions, he needs to refer financing to us, and we decide that at the budget meetings. I'm fine with a department head presenting a budget and having a great discussion at a town board level. What I'm not fine with, that the supervisor seemed left out, we had about $470,000 in equipment funding last year, and now this year's budget's at about $270,000. And the average plow truck to replace a big plow truck that you watch drive by your house is about $262,000 right now. So, we definitely have a difference of opinion. And I feel this, the taxpayers are our customers. You put a good quality product out there, and most people are going to be happy. If you explain to people why you need it and what you need to do for it in your plan, and if your plan fails to come through, they've got every reason to vote you out. And that's how I look at it.
And we purchased a new plow every year that I've been there. Not only that, other equipments. We just purchased a payloader, some backhoes. We purchased all new trucks. So they're in pretty good shape. But like I explained to you, if you buy 3 trucks all in 1 year, they all come due at the same time. So instead of having to pay $270,000, you're looking at $810,000 6 or 7 or 8 years down the road. So you have to budget properly.
Right. And when you order a truck in a year and it takes 2 years to come in, you have to also plan ahead.
And we have.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. So the last question I have, because you both said that you would give me an hour, you kind of led into, so that the work meeting for the budget, I think it was October 16th, if I remember correctly, if people want to take a look at that conversation about the salt, but it was recorded by PAC-B. And that's kind of where my last question comes in. And I had mentioned that I sent you the questions ahead of time, but I had one question that was brought up to me on Friday. Somebody else mentioned it on Saturday. And then I had 2 or 3 people kind of talk about it to me today. So I want to ask you, and Kevin, I'll come to you first with this one. So I'll give you a second to think about it. But basically, when we think of Baldwinsville, it's not just the town of Lysander, right? You have the town of Lysander, you have the village, and you have Van Buren. And you mentioned a couple times how we share the assessor, but that's not all that we share between those 3 entities. So my question to you is, how do you envision the relationship between Lysander, Van Buren, and the village? Because we do share resources such as Canton Wood Senior Center and PAC-B. And in the past, the towns worked together with the village to have concerts on Paper Mill Island. So just again, going back to that quality of life of where we live, how do you envision that relationship if you're elected as our town supervisor?
Well, remember, the town board decides the majority of this stuff. It's not just one person in a cylinder, in a vacuum. You have 5 people on the board. 3 people have to, 2 other people have to buy into the idea.
Right.
And I don't look, the town supervisor is the figurehead. He's the one running the meetings. He or she is the ones running the meetings. They're the ones answering the phone every day at town hall. And the town board members come together, you throw emails in and out to each other, and you try to come to a consensus so you can have a meeting that might not last 5 hours to discuss everything. I love long discussions. I'm there all night. That's what people are paying me for. I'm fine. We'll set up a cot. But working with the village, we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I think we could do more. Some stuff doesn't work out. You try to share equipment, and then it's like, well, who's going to use the vac truck during the day, and who gets to use it at night? Probably most people don't want their drains being sucked out at at 8:00 at night. So that has some issue. That has some hard parts to share. But working with the village on taking care of an issue, sending some trucks over, they send some trucks over to us, or if a truck's broke down, that's what we have IMAs, intermunicipal agreements, for. Working with Van Buren, it hasn't been done much in recent years to my knowledge. We have Canton Woods. I'd love to see us get back into more of the culture stuff, which alluded to one of your other questions, and normally we do that through the parks. It would be great to see, we have concerts on the amphitheater, Paper Mill Island, but it'd be great to see some at the town park too, because as great as Paper Mill Island is, it's not the easiest thing to access. You got to come across the bridge. It'd be nice to have some place where people could pull up, like you go through Claytown Park over next to the Y. They do community band nights, or they have like the orchestra there. It'd be awesome to see something like that at Lysander Park, or maybe even here at Radisson at Hornaday Park, something where people could pull up, go out, and, access it without having to, walk a half a mile and park and, do things like that. We're moving forward on Lysander Park. We know we have a parking issue. If you've been to the park this year, since now that we have lacrosse there and soccer there, Pop Warner there, the spray park, it is, the usage of the park is probably doubled or tripled, and that's even since COVID, which is great. It's awesome. 2013, when I first interviewed with a committee for running for town councilor, they'd ask me, what would you like to see us do? And I go, our park. It's the most underutilized thing we have. And it sort of got laughed at. And, 10 years later, it's definitely getting used. It's great to see that. But that those working with the village, we have to. The village is there. The village is, a lot of people that live in the town of Lysander live in the village, and we have a great village board, very receptive. They don't really have a parks department, but they have parks. We've done programs there. We've our park directors tried to work with them and have different things, and I don't think we shouldn't sell the school district short. They have opportunities for us to do. When I was a kid, you used to have pool nights at the at the pool at Baker. And that was put on by, either Lysander or Van Buren, depending on the time of the year. And we need to get back into those kind of things, because there's a lot of, it's not just all for kids. There's a lot of adults that enjoy that kind of stuff. The community band playing. It's all those things when you're younger, you're like, wow, then you get older and it's like, oh, it'd be nice to be able to take a walk or park at the park and, watch somebody like that. Kids are playing. As Councilor Gerasi always says, what do people do with green spaces or parks? A lot of people just go there to sit and watch, have some benches and just relax and look at the scenery and the green space. And I was fortunate. I grew up in the middle of the green space, out in the hamlet of Lysander, out on Church Road, working on the farm, my family's farm. And it was a great experience. I love, you just take your bike and ride. Back in that day, you weren't as nervous about what might happen, or my parents weren't. I don't know. But it was a great experience, and everybody should get to enjoy it. And we can bring that stuff to them, as a town.
Thank you. Bob, for that same question to you, please.
Yeah, shared operations. The mayor, Dick Clark, the outgoing mayor, wrote an article in the Messenger on in support of me, and what he talked about is how we work closely together. I also work closely with the new town supervisor over in Van Buren, Rick Zachariah. He and I have gone to several meetings with different legislators, Rachel May being one, Brandon Williams being another, where we were talking about concerns for both our communities because we're so interconnected, and they realize, and a lot of it had to do with traffic and some had to do with grants. Now, speaking of grants, we have the LWRP grant, the Local Waterfront Revitalization Program grant. That's a $150,000 grant that will develop a plan where we could go out and get other grant money. And the plan is to develop the waterfront, and along with developing the waterfront, it'll be for tourism, it'll be for recreation, it'll be for bike paths, it'll help with, we'll be able to go out and secure grants, anything that's along the river, which are our businesses, we'll be able to go out and secure grants for our businesses. And although the town of Van Buren, prior to the current supervisor being there, decided not to participate in the grant, once he got into office, I had a conversation with him and I invited him in to be part of this process because Van Buren is an integral part of the Lysander community. So he's going to be part of our process as well. With the village, they had, we just completed a water issue that we had down at the Fireside. Years ago, they built, the town actually allowed the Fireside to build over a water main, which was a problem for probably 50 years. And the village couldn't, and the town couldn't come to an agreement during that time on how to repair it. Well, I worked with the village, and we utilizing some of our ARPA money, we took care of that problem. So, we worked together. They had some concerns, and we had some concerns, and we were able to work that out. So now that Fireside Water project is not an issue anymore, and that was with a collaboration between the two of us. When my opponent here talks about intermunicipal agreements, when I came in, there were a number of agreements that should have been in place and they weren't in place. One of the first things I did was to have our attorney write up some intermunicipal agreements with the town of Van Buren and the town of Clay, so that when we do share services that we're covered. That's one of the issues why you need those intermunicipal agreements. You can't just go to the village and say, hey, we want to borrow some of your equipment or we want to use some of your people. You have to have these intermunicipal agreements in place so that everybody's concerns are covered. If somebody gets hurt and there's a workers' compensation issue, if they're using Lysander equipment and they damage it, who's going to pay for that? I made sure all of those intermunicipal agreements were in place so that Lysander's concerns, specifically Lysander's concerns, were taken care of. The park director is working on many new projects, which include, and we just had a conversation, included reinstituting those Tuesday night concerts. The problem was when I came in that there was funding going on. They were, the town actually was, and both towns were actually going out and soliciting funds from outside entities and private entities and for these different concerts. And that's actually illegal. I mean, I don't think they were intentionally doing that, but when I did the research on it, I found that you can't do that. A municipality, village, some municipalities can. Village law is different than town law, and it's different than city and county law. So the county can do it, the city can do it. I'm not sure about villages, but towns cannot do it. So we had to disband that funding, and we're in the process of establishing our own Friends of the Park so that if we have a friends group, they can actually go out and do the soliciting. We can advise them on some of the things that we would like to accomplish, but they would actually be the entity that could go out and do the fundraising, and that would make it legal. So we're already in the process of establishing 501c3 and a Friends of the Park. I think that's what they're going to be called, so that we can continue doing the soliciting and go out, or they can do it, and they can provide the concerts along with the parks director. We, as far as using other facilities, we just, our parks director just completed a track program where we utilize the school's facilities. So we work in concert with them. They're even talking about using some of our facilities now. The park director just came in the other day, and he got a call from the sports director and said, hey, he found out that some municipalities have agreements with local parks. And so he called up our parks director, and we're going to get involved in that, where they utilize our facilities, we utilize their facilities, and the same thing with the village. I want to get our parks director more involved with the village as far as helping them out with their parks as well. So I've instituted a lot of things where we're doing it, and all three municipalities here, including all the other towns, Clay, Salina, Cicero, we all work very well together.
Nice. So, and thank you, gentlemen, because like I said, I kind of threw that question in there to you, but when we think of quick share from me, my standpoint, when I moved up here from Pennsylvania, I didn't know if I lived in Baldwinsville, Lysander. I didn't, and so, and I didn't know the village was something separate. And it really is. It's nice as being a part of the village, the town of Lysander, and doing things in Van Buren. I thought that was a valid question that people were asking, because we are really one big community, even though you gentlemen are just part of the town of Lysander. So
no, that was a good question. I'm glad we had the opportunity to answer it.
Yeah, and a lot of communities, not outside of New York State, they run everything by the county. So it's school districts. Everything's, overseen by the county as opposed to the local municipalities. So it's a common question. I get people, oh, can I vote for you? Or can I, it's like, well, what side of the river do you live on? Because I'm from Beeville. Everybody's from Beeville, which it's great. It's a great community.
Yeah, actually, when I thought about asking a couple of people for questions, I forgot that they're in Van Buren. Not that they can't,
Right.
have questions or things to ask. But so you gentlemen did agree to give me an hour, and I've gone over the hour. I think, a couple other questions I wish I could have gotten to, but I'll, respect that time. So I am going to ask, maybe if you want to wrap it up by just giving kind of that last statement, why you think it's important for you to be the town supervisor, whether it's your first term or it's your reelection term. But does anybody, I'll give you a choice this time. Anybody want to start, or do you want me to call on one of you to go first?
Doesn't matter to me.
Oh, that was you. Then you just, since you spoke, I'm going to throw it to you, Kevin.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. It's sort of like when we go to the town board meetings. Thanks for watching. Shelley, thanks for putting this on. Bob, thanks for doing this. I think it's great for the community to, to see where we both stand. And, at the end of the day, this is, it's about running the town. And as I stated before, I like to follow the process. I want the public to know. I want to be able to explain things at the meetings. So, why we're having this public hearing, what it's about. I want to outreach more to the community. I will be doing outreach nights if I'm elected supervisor, and even if I'm not, I want to go to the community, whether it's at a fire station, town hall, stay there later, make it accessible for people. A lot of people come up and ask questions, and it'd be nice if it's out there. Also, the other thing on outreach is, and I know Bob's done them, Shelley, you've done a great job with the Hard Home and Community Talks with elected officials and other people, in various departments in the village and in the town. And it's great. Those things need to get out there more. We need to update our town website. Everybody's on the internet now. A lot of questions that get answered could be done by a short video. I'd like to finish our $40,000 AV system we started at town hall to make the meetings accessible, so we could live stream a meeting. We're almost there. We're figuring the audio part out now, which, it was a great idea to try to save money, but it doesn't work well when we try to use it. And some of that stuff, you make mistakes, you own them, and you move on. As I said before, I'm going to work for the taxpayer citizen of Lysander. I want to allow public comments at meetings. I don't think that most of the public has great answers, great questions. We just got to honor them and respect them by allowing them to have that input. And that's all. And thank you again.
Thank you. Bob, if you'd like to end it for us.
Sure. Over the last 4 years, we've had a good progress in the town. We've made significant improvements to our park, which is enjoyed by hundreds of visitors weekly. Our roads are in very good condition, and we have fixed much of our infrastructure. I have kept our taxes down, implementing a lean management philosophy and by securing alternative funding sources. We head into the next 4 years with our town in excellent financial condition. We do have challenges ahead of us in the next 4 years, although we do have exciting opportunities in our future. The LWRP Local Waterfront Revitalization Program grant will allow us to qualify for additional grants for small business development, waterway tourism, and recreational development. I have the vision, experience, education, and political contacts to lead us into the future. I would be honored to represent you for another 4 years. I ask that you vote Robert A. Wicks when you go in to cast your vote for town supervisor. And again, thank you, Shelley, and thank everybody, and thank you, Kevin. Thank everybody else that tuned in to watch this, and
Thank you.
hope to see you again.
And as he said, early voting open at Town Hall until next Sunday, and then Election Day is Tuesday. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you both, and everybody enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right.